This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. This is about a system that still looks solid from the outside while quietly behaving like something that knows it is running out of time. Nothing here collapses all at once. That's the mistake people always make. They wait for the explosion, but systems like this don't explode first. They stretch, they reach, they start doing things they didn't need to do before. And when you see that shift, when power begins moving, not through debate or markets, but through force aimed at tangible things, that's not strength. That's compensation. You are living inside a moment that will later be described as obvious, not dramatic, not sudden, just mathematically unavoidable. If you're still with me, stay. Because once you understand what quietly took control here, you will never read the news the same way again. And what's coming next does not announce itself. It never does. I want to slow this down for just a second, because the danger here is not chaos. It's control that no longer works the way we think it does. We are trained to look for people, presidents, generals, CEOs, faces to blame, faces to trust. But systems don't actually move that way. What controls this moment now is not ideology. It's not elections. It's not even policy. It's obligation, mathematical obligation. A system built on promises that compound faster than the real world can produce value to meet them. When that happens, decisions stop being optional. They become reactive, automatic. At that point, power stops asking what is right. It starts asking what is liquid, what is extractable, what can be converted into stability quickly. That's the shift most people miss, because nothing looks broken yet. But once a system crosses that line, every move afterward starts to look strangely familiar. And if this feels abstract now, it won't for long, because the next change wasn't announced, it was normalized. For a long time, this system worked because it moved slowly, slow enough that each change felt reasonable, temporary, responsible even, before stability came from production, from making things, from surplus, from margins that could absorb mistakes. Now, stability comes from motion, from rolling obligations forward, from refinancing yesterday with tomorrow. That shift didn't happen overnight. It happened quietly, so quietly that most people never noticed the moment it flipped. Debt stopped being a tool. It became the structure. Before, borrowing filled gaps between growth cycles. Now, borrowing is the cycle. The system doesn't expand and contract anymore. It only extends, and here's why that matters. Slow change feels safe. Fast change triggers fear. So systems prefer slow decay. Every year, the numbers grew, not explosively, predictably, manageably on paper, until the paper became the reality. And once that happens, the system can't slow down without breaking itself. So it does the only thing left. It keeps moving forward, outward, towards something solid. And that's where the first visible shock appears. The moment always arrives disguised as something else. A single event, a sharp move, explained as necessary, contained, over. It's presented as a response to circumstances, a correction, a message. But if you look closely, the justification doesn't matter. What matters is what was targeted, not markets, not laws, not institutions. Assets, things that exist, whether confidence does or not, things that don't depend on belief to hold value. This is where people get distracted. They argue about legality, about politics, about whether it was justified. Those arguments miss the point, because this kind of move doesn't happen when a system feels secure. It happens when stability has to be reinforced physically, not to fix the problem, to postpone it. And here's the part that should unsettle you. Once this line is crossed, it doesn't get uncrossed. The system has learned something about itself, that it can no longer rely on abstraction alone. And once force replaces trust, even briefly, the clock starts moving faster. Because what comes next is not another explanation. It's a pattern. Here's the mechanism most people never see while it's working. When a system can no longer balance itself through growth, it shifts the burden instead of removing it. Not upward, not outward, downward. The beneficiaries are not mysterious. They are the ones closest to the creation of money, closest to policy, closest to assets that rise when confidence falls. They don't need the system to be healthy. They only need it to keep operating. The damage doesn't arrive as a crash. It arrives as dilution, as prices that drift higher while wages lag behind, as savings that look unchanged in numbers but shrink quietly in meaning. This is how imbalance is hidden. By spreading it thin, by turning loss into background noise, the system keeps its promises on paper by breaking them in practice. And here's the crucial part. This is not corruption. It's design under stress. Once debt obligations dominate decision-making, someone must absorb the cost of keeping the machine running. And if you're wondering who that usually is, look at who doesn't get a choice. Because the next shock doesn't come from the top. It comes from the strain below. Now the pace changes, because strain doesn't stay quiet forever. Prices move first, not evenly, not predictably. Essentials react before luxuries. Food, energy, housing. Then comes the confusion. Official numbers say one thing. Your receipt says another. Trust thins, not collapses. Thins. People adjust. They cut back. They delay. They absorb until they can't. This is when the system starts reacting to its own reactions. Short-term fixes, emergency measures, temporary rules that quietly stay. Each response creates pressure somewhere else. Each patch accelerates the underlying problem. And here's the detail that matters most. At this stage, stability depends on speed, on confidence, not pausing long enough to ask questions. That's why everything starts happening faster. Announcements stack. Decisions compress. Complex issues get simplified because hesitation is dangerous now. And once momentum replaces deliberation, the system isn't steering anymore. It's bracing. What breaks next isn't abstract. It's personal. This is where it reaches you. Not as a headline, as a calculation. You notice it when your paycheck clears and somehow covers less than it did before. When saving feels disciplined, but falling behind anyway. You did what you were told. You worked, you planned, you waited, and now the rules feel thinner, less reliable. This isn't about panic, it's about compression. Choices narrowing, margins disappearing. When systems absorb pressure by spreading loss, they don't announce who's paying. They just let you discover it slowly. You feel it in decisions you didn't used to make. What to postpone, what to downgrade, what to give up. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The system still needs you calm, still participating, still believing this is temporary. So it doesn't scare you. It exhausts you. If this feels familiar, stay with me. Because what's happening to you isn't isolated. It's being repeated everywhere. What starts locally never stays there. Because systems like this are interconnected by design. Pressure doesn't disappear. It migrates. Capital moves first, quietly. Legally, searching for places where friction is lower and promises feel sturdier. Trade adjusts next. Settlements shift. Dependencies rearrange. None of this is announced as retreat. It's framed as efficiency, diversification, modernization, but underneath, something important is happening. Trust is being redistributed. When confidence in one center weakens, others don't rush to replace it. They hedge against it. That's how dominance erodes. Not with rejection, with redundancy. And once alternatives exist, the original system has to work harder to justify why everything should still flow through it. That's when leverage flips. Negotiations change tone. Assumptions stop holding. The system can still function like this. For a while, but it becomes more sensitive, more reactive, less forgiving, because now instability anywhere can propagate everywhere, and the future stops being linear. From here, the future doesn't arrive as a single outcome. It splits. There are three paths a system like this can take once pressure reaches this level. None of them are clean. None of them are painless. The first is adjustment. Gradual, controlled spending slows. Expectations reset. Living standards plateau rather than rise. Nothing breaks all at once. But nothing feels abundant again either. The second is erosion. This is quieter, more deceptive. The system keeps functioning, but trust thins year after year. The currency buys less. Promises stretch longer. Stability becomes performative. People adapt individually, not collectively. And then there's rupture. Rare, fast, triggered by something small that hits at the wrong moment. A failed auction, a sudden loss of confidence, a shock that forces reality to surface all at once. History never tells us which path will be chosen in advance. It only tells us that once these conditions exist, one of them eventually asserts itself. We're not at the decision point yet, but we're past the moment where outcomes are flexible. What matters now is recognition, because the ending doesn't announce itself either. Nothing here resolves cleanly. There is no moment where someone steps in and restores the system to the version you remember. No reset button. No speech that makes the math reverse. What exists instead is a narrowing window between understanding and consequence. History is very clear about this part. The most dangerous phase is not collapse. It's the period right before, when everything still works just well enough to discourage action. That's where attention matters, because the system doesn't fail all at once. It signals quietly, repeatedly, and those signals are already here. If you're watching this, you're not early, but you're not late either. What happens next depends on what people notice, what they ignore, and how long they assume stability is the default. Don't treat this as a warning. Treat it as a lens, because in the next chapter, the signals get harder to dismiss. If you want to understand when this shifts from strain to inevitability, stay with me. In the next video, we'll track the specific indicators that tell you which path is taking shape. Not opinions, not predictions. Signals. And once you see them, you don't get to unsee them.